Hey folks, I have almost finished reading The Longlist for the Republic of Consciousness Prize for the US and Canada. I have read 8 books and I'm halfway through the last 2 books. The shortlist is being announced on Tuesday, March 5th. So I thought I would take this opportunity to tell you my impressions of the long list and give you not really my predictions, but my what would be my short list if I were the one in charge. Even though I haven't fully read the long list yet, I have a pretty solid idea of what my short list would be. And actually it'll include one of the books I haven't yet finished. So yes, I'll share my personal shortlist with you in just a moment, but I want to tell you, give you a little summary of each of these books on the long list, but I don't want to do it just sitting here talking with you and giving you yet another summary of 10 books. So I thought we would do something a little bit different today. So I have also been reading and haven't quite finished yet, I'm really savoring it, How to Draw a Novel by Martínez, and this is translated from the Spanish by Heather Cleary, and it's published by Grove Press. And this is a collection of essays. It's a lot of craft of writing essays. But what a lot of the essays do is they take novels, famous novels, and Martínez takes the plot or takes the story of those novels and turns it into a line drawing. For example, you'll see the end papers here. Examples of some of the drawings, but kind of takes like different elements of the plot and how the story of these famous novels moves. Is there a lot of digressions? Is there a lot of obstacles? So this, for example, is Moby Dick. Lots and lots and lots of different digressions and ups and downs. Oh, here's a page that shows the Metamorphosis, Ulysses, The Great Gatsby, and Orlando, all as line drawings. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to turn the Republic of Consciousness Prize for the US and Canada long list into line drawings. My impressions of the long list, each of the books, as a line drawing. And I'm not an artist, so that's going to make it extra hilarious, I hope. We will see how this goes. Okay, let's find a blank page here in our sketchbook. Ooh. Ah, pretty. Oh, what is that? All right. Let's start with Your Love Is Not Good by Johanna Hedva. This is published by And Other Stories. This is a story of an unnamed artist who is struggling with a lot. She's struggling financially, she's struggling emotionally, she's struggling with her relationships, she's dealing with a lot of past trauma and a really, really complicated relationship with her mother. She is of mixed race. Her father was Korean American, and her mother was white, and she is dealing with a lot of the pervasive racism that's in the art world, but she's really on the brink of her first big break. Along the way encounters some obstacles. So really the novel kind of follows our narrator as she's encountering these increasingly large obstacles, and then she basically falls into a pit of despair and attempts to climb back up. Maybe we'll even draw little obstacles. So she encounters these obstacles and tries to surmount them. One thing I've heard the author say is that they really wrote this as an anti-autofiction, that there's a lot of similar autobiographical details between Johanna Hedva and the narrator of the novel, but that at each obstacle the narrator encounters, Johanna Hedva had the narrator make the opposite decision of what Hedva would do in the same situation. So I really imagine this as like our narrator encountering these obstacles and then kind of going in the wrong direction. So kind of looping around them and going in the wrong direction, making very questionable choices as she's encountering each of these obstacles. And then she just falls into a pit of despair. The poor thing. And then she's just desperately trying to climb back up. There's a lot of juicy details, a lot of cringe-worthy moments in Your Love Is Not Good. There's Your Love Is Not Good. And here's the Johanna Hedva on the back. Best author photo ever. All right. Next up, Landscapes by Christine Lai. This is published by $2 Radio. This is the story of Penelope, who is living in kind of a near future time of climate catastrophe, and she lives in an old country estate, big mansion with her partner. It is crumbling to the ground. So this big estate is actually serving as a home for climate refugees at the moment. And Penelope is like an art historian, I believe, and she is attempting to catalog the estate's massive art collection because the house is scheduled to be demolished soon, along with everything in it. A lot of it is diary entries of cataloging this art collection, and Penelope is also dealing with a traumatic event from her past. And so a lot of what this novel is Penelope ruminating in circles and spirals about all sorts of different things in her life. So we have Penelope, and she's worried about the house. She's worried about the climate and all the plants and the land around the house that have been destroyed, and the trees especially that are all dead because there's been no rain ever. This is my dead tree. And then she worries some more about the house, and then she worries about people in the house and her traumatic past, and more worrying about the climate, trees and birds. And she just continuously worrying about the books in the house. It's a book. And of course, all the big art collection in the house as well. And she just continues to worry about these things and think about them and talk about art until it kind of leads her outwards. There is progression in the novel. But meanwhile, we have Penelope's perspective, but we have another perspective. I won't tell you whose perspective that is, but intermittently in between Penelope's sections, we have this other story that's happening along the way. A lot of it is about the role of art, and especially the role of art in a world that's collapsing around you. Like, what role does art play? There's a lot about class differences here as well. It's just a really thoughtful, deep book for being so short. Really enjoyed it. And we have The Long Form by Kate Briggs, and this is published by Dorothy, a publishing project. And this is the story of a mother, Helen, and her baby, Rose. And Rose is, I think, just 6 weeks old, maybe, when we're in the novel. It really only takes place over the course of one day. And Helen is desperately trying to get Rose to fall asleep. As she is trying to get Rose to fall asleep one morning, she gets a delivery. And the delivery is Tom Jones, The History of Tom Jones by Henry Fielding. What you end up with is scenes of Rose and Helen, and interspersed are almost like essay-like elements about Tom Jones, about the novel as a form in general. But really, at the end of the day, you have a novel that's about a mother trying to rock her baby to sleep in various ways throughout the day, desperately trying to move and do different tricks to get her baby to sleep. So it's a lot of rocking back and forth, Helen and Rose. But then it's also rocking back and forth. Helen picking up the book, thinking about the novel, and then these essays that are kind of rocking back and forth between Helen and Rose, and then these like essay-like elements. What you end up with is the most brilliant novel that has momentum forward. So these rocking motions move, there's progression of Helen and Rose's story throughout the day. So you have momentum this way, but then you also have elevation of the novel this way, and really elevating every aspect of Helen and Rose's life to a level where a mother trying to get her newborn baby to sleep is parallel to any other intellectual or creative pursuit. That a mother and her newborn baby and the interactions they have are just as creative and require just as much brain power as any other pursuit. And that is the long form. Let's do the birthday party next. So the birthday party is about a tiny little hamlet in a small French village where 3 houses exist next to each other in this little hamlet. One house is empty, and one house is occupied by an artist named Christine, and the other house is a farmer, Patrice, and his wife Marion, and their little girl Ida. Patrice is in the process of planning a 40th birthday party for his wife. But you open with Christine, who's been receiving anonymous threatening letters delivered to her door. And so you get Christine's perspective first. And one of the most notable things about this novel is the winding, lengthy, extremely detailed sentences that each character gives you. So you get Christine's perspective, you get little Ida's perspective. Each of them are winding, giving you every possible detail you could possibly want about their life and day. And you get Patrice, the husband, who has a winding perspective as well. He makes a little boo-boo error that plunges him into a pit of despair at one point leading up to the birthday party. So you get the 3 of them, and then you do get Marion, the birthday girl, who's turning 40, get her perspective a little bit, all leading to an explosive situation where 3 strangers come in. They all end up in a very violent, very crazy, very explosive situation together. There's still just as much detail as there was back here happening. And who will make it out? You'll have to read to find out. That's The Birthday Party. The Birthday Party by Laurent Mauvignier, translated by Daniell, Levin, Becker. It's published by Transit Books. Let's do The Sorrows of Others, which is not a novel. It's actually a short story collection. It's by Ada Zhang. These short stories are mostly about families, Chinese families and Chinese American families. They are what I think a lot of people might call quiet stories, but there's a lot of emotional depth and drama and trauma and a lot going on in these short stories. Again, a lot of them are about family relationships. There's one I think that's about some friends/frenemies. A lot about generational differences. I really see most of the stories having this shape. They're characters that are kind of moving along one way in the world, and they encounter something that makes them reconsider their life, reconsider their place within their family. They revisit an old memory and realize something new about that time in their life that they didn't realize before. They encounter something about their current situation that makes them take a step back and say, oh, okay, maybe I'm not in the place that I thought I was. Maybe I'm not dealing with the situation in my life that I thought I was dealing with. So I think that almost all of the stories have this shape to them, where you have a character who is moving along and hit something in their life, whether it's another person, whether it's a secret that they learn, whether it's a situation, they hit something that makes them think back, turn back, look back, reconsider. And I just realized that the shape of the cover is kind of similar. The cover, though, smartly has these arrows intersecting, because that's a lot of what these stories are doing, is people moving along their lives and intersecting at these key points with others. That intersection making them turn or pivot, making them reconsider something about their lives, reconsider a moment, and then move in a new direction. So that is the beautiful short story collection, The Sorrows of Others. Let's do Crossstitch. So this is Crossstitch by Jazmina Barrera. It's translated by Christina MacSweeney, and this is published by Two Lines Press. This is the story of 3 friends who live in Mexico City. I've seen this listed with a hyphen and without, but I'm not sure exactly. So these 3 friends, one is the narrator, and we learn that one of the 3 friends has just died, has just drowned. And so what this novel is a moving back and forth in time to give a picture and a story of the friendship of these 3 girls. And they're in the present day in the novel, they're all adults. They're all probably maybe in their 30s. And so we're moving back and forth in time. And the narrator has just also completed a book and published a book about embroidery and the art of embroidery and cross stitch. And these 3 girls, one of the things they had in common was they would cross stitch. What is so brilliant about this novel that I've shared in other videos is the movement of both the narrative through time, but then also the movement of the characters in relation to each other is the movement of cross stitch. So when you do cross stitch, you have a stitch in the front and then a stitch in the back, on the back of the fabric, and then the second stitch on the front to make a cross. Stitch in the front, stitch in the back of the fabric, come back up the front of the fabric. And so you create a full picture with crosses where there's always a stitch in the back. And the way this moves backwards and forwards in time, the way this novel moves, you go down, back. The way the novel moves in time is a lot of back and forth like this. But the girls are almost never all 3 together. Of course, in the beginning, the one woman has died, so she's in the background now, permanently. But even in their childhood, they're never all together. There are always 2 of them, and the third is somewhere else. Even just in like a simple moment, like at a museum, the third will go off and see some exhibit they want to see, while the other 2 are going around the museum together. Almost always throughout the whole novel. And I just thought that was so cool how that mimics the way cross stitch itself works, where there's 2 visible stitches in the front, but always an anchoring stitch in the back, on the back of the fabric. Yeah, so if I was more talented, I would do try to actually make some sort of image out of crosses here, but I neither have the time nor the talent to do that for you. Just picture something cool. And that's cross stitch. Let's do one of the books I haven't actually finished yet. So I'm more than halfway through. This is Breaking and Entering by Gillmor, and we're following B. B has just turned 50, and she is dealing with a lot in her life. She lives in Toronto. There is an incredible heat wave, horrible heat wave, and so there's a lot of climate change stuff in this book, actually. But that's not all that B is dealing with. She has a mother who has dementia, a sister who is really unhelpful with the mother and kind of whiny and annoying. She has a son who is kind of floundering a little bit. He's in college, and then she has a husband who is distant, and yeah, there's something going on with the husband. I'm not sure yet for sure. I have my suspicions. We have B, and she's dealing with just a lot of big issues. Poor Bee is. And so she's navigating them. And then one day she discovers the world and community of amateur lockpicking when she Googles escape. And so Bee becomes an amateur lockpicker and finds herself breaking into homes in her community just for the thrill of it. What happens to Bee? I don't yet know, but read and find out. It's a little, this one I feel like is a little rough. What are you gonna do? All right, since we're talking about books I haven't yet finished, let's talk about the box. The box is gonna be hard to talk about because the box is wild. The box is by Mandy Suzanne Wong, and this is published by Grey Wolf Press. And this takes place in an unnamed city where it is snowing continuously at a constant rate. And it's kind of funny that these two books, the last one I mentioned, Breaking and Entering, takes place during an extreme heat wave that lasts for months. And this takes place during an extreme snow, it's not even a storm, just extreme snow that lasts for months. We have in the city a box that's kind of woven paper white box. There doesn't seem to be any way to open it. This box is very mysterious, and what we get are episodes with this box. So we see the box, we get the story of this box with like one character, a set of characters. And then we see the box again in the same city, but with different people telling us the story. And there's some overlap in the story where you get a little bit of a clue about what is going on with this box, because this box is exchanging hands. And there is one particular woman who is looking for this box and is frantically searching. So you get all these stories where there's little elements, like you see the woman pop up in each of these stories, little elements that overlap from story to story, and it ends up being this crazy puzzle about this mysterious box that no one seems to be able to open, and also this crazy snow that's happening in the city. And it's a puzzle. It's just a puzzle. It is really funny and really bizarre and really incredible. You have the snowstorm happening at a constant rate that has brought the city basically to a screeching halt. It's causing all sorts of problems in the city. But then you have these, the people who are telling the story of the box, and they're kind of weighed down by the story of the snow and the box that they're telling us. So what you're getting are accounts. You don't get like an actual scene with the box. You get these accounts from all these people about the box. And the box is a complete mystery. You don't know what's in it. I'm going to color it in because you have no idea what's going on with this damn box. And that's basically the box. That is the box. I have no idea if you were going to find out what's actually going on with the box, but I can't wait. Let's talk about Two Sherpas. Two Sherpas is the story of two Sherpas. One is old-ish, one is young, and these Sherpas are on an expedition, on a trek on Mount Everest. The man that they were accompanying, guiding up Mount Everest has just fallen over the side of a cliff. And so you open with the two Sherpas peering over this cliff down at the British man who has fallen and is now laying down at the bottom of this ledge. So that's the main storyline, is this moment with these two Sherpas peering over a ledge. But then you have, and the author has even described these as different threads. You have 5 different threads. You have the main thread with the two Sherpas, and then you have 4 other threads. For example, the young Sherpa is in a school play of Julius Caesar, Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. And so these threads intersect with the main action, which is just these two Sherpas looking over the ledge. Each of these threads, I won't tell you what they each are so that you can encounter them for yourself. Weave in and out, alternating across the novel, and they each have something to do with each other, but they're intersecting in different ways. And so you get these short chapters of these 5 different threads, but always coming back to our 2 Sherpas who are at the ledge staring at our British guy who has fallen, and behind them looms Mount Everest and the rest of the Himalayas. And that, my friends, is 2 Sherpas. Last but definitely not least is Lman by Ebru Ocean. It's translated by Aaron Aji and Sailing Gokeksu, published by City Lights Books. This is an intense, claustrophobic novel that takes place in winter in a remote region of Turkey. And we're following a mother who's living in a small, claustrophobic, I'll say it again, home with her daughter. And she also has a little boy and has just given birth to another baby boy. That's supposed to be a baby. They also have a neighbor who checks in on them from time to time. Okay, I'm giving him a hat, although I don't think he actually wears a hat, but he has a hat. The husband and father of this family has disappeared. He's left the family and they don't know where he is. He hasn't come back. That's the father. So we follow this woman who, she's not the biggest fan of motherhood. She's just given birth to her 3rd child in the house in the middle of a snowstorm. And she has fallen into a pit of despair, I would say. She's in a pit. And her daughter, who's like a preteen, is trying to exist as well in this house best she can, but she also is falling into a pit of her own of sorts. So we follow them in this intense situation. Things are deteriorating rapidly for this family, these 3 children and their mother. And the neighbor, he checks in on them from time to time as best he can, tries to, he can see that things aren't going well. Things just start to escalate until partway through the book, something happens. And that something impacts all of them. And they all end up dealing with this something. I can't tell you what the something is. This isn't the prettiest drawing, but it also isn't the prettiest book. Needless to say, I adored it. And that is Lman by Ebru Ocean. I'll just note that Lman is the missing father is the teacher of this small community. He's been, it's a position that is filled by the state, by the government. He's brought into these little communities. And I believe the Lman is the building, the place where they live and maybe teach from. So that is what Lman refers to. That is the long list, which brings us to a momentous decision, and that is, what would my personal shortlist be for this year's Republic of Consciousness Prize for the US and Canada? I am 100% sure about 3 of the books on my personal shortlist. The remaining 2 places on my personal shortlist, I'm a little less sure about because I thought the entire long list had really incredible qualities to them. Each and every book was so unique and really provoked a lot of thought for me. So I'm a little less sure about those remaining 2, but I'm fairly confident in what I've arrived at for my personal shortlist. So what is it? What is the shortlist? First and foremost, my favorite book from the long list was The Long Form by Kate Briggs. This blew my mind as I read it. I haven't read anything like it, and I know that there are a lot of books on this list that you could say that about, but this one I just think was flawless. It was so incredible, so inventive, had so much to say, but also was a beautiful story. Like, it was just a beautiful story of a new mother, along with everything else that it contained. I love novels that at their core are about novels, that are about writing fiction. And this is, I don't know if you can get any better than this. So this was my winner of the whole long list. I'm gonna go out on a limb, and even though I have not yet finished The Box by Mandy Suzanne Wong from Grey Wolf Press, and say this was my second favorite. And I have not even finished it yet, but I think this is wild. This is so good. It's funny, it's inventive, it's so different. This is not for everybody, and I know that, but it is so for me. It is so for me. There were times when I felt like this book, helicopter, I live in the city and there's always noise. There were moments when I was reading this where I felt like it was almost like I was watching a Doctor Who episode because it's about this like mysterious box that maybe has a mind of its own, and we're in this really like isolated environment with really quirky, weird characters with very distinctive voices. It almost feels like an almost alien world, even though the point is very much that this is our world, but it felt so alien, and so the atmosphere was so rich with the constantly falling snow at an absolutely even rate. The snow in this book is falling at the exact same rate for like months on end, and then melting at the exact same rate for months on end. And it just felt kind of reminiscent of like the best Doctor Who episode, but obviously with much more depth to it. And number 3, which was at the number 2 spot until I started reading The Box, was Lman by Ebru Ocean, and this is from City Lights Books. This is just incredibly intense book, and fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. It is relentless in its intensity. It is dark. I will warn folks that there is an incident or 2 of animal cruelty in this book. So if you're sensitive to that, beware going in. However, it is essential to this book. That element is essential to the plot and the movement and the progression of this book. And it was hard to read, which is the point. It was so well done. The ending was very inventive, very inventive, but also like I much preferred the beginning, like the first half of the novel. By the end, I was like, oh, this is wild and amazing, but I preferred the section of the novel that happens before the like really wild part. That leaves us with our 2 spots that are kind of a little bit up in the air, but I think what we're gonna go with is the 2 remaining books that have left me with the most to think about. Like when I continue to speak about these books with other people, I can keep finding, and those of us who've read it can keep finding nuggets to talk about. And I think that is a sign of a rich, rewarding reading experience. Those 2 would be Landscapes by Christina Lai, and this is published by $2 Radio. I read this the longest ago of the whole long list. This was the first one I read way back in, I think, September. There are so many things that have stuck with me with this book, and I really found the form of the novel really interesting and engaging, with the diary entries and then snippets of kind of art history and art criticism throughout. And there's so much going on in a pretty short book. And I also really thought that this really did deal with climate change in a way that I really appreciated. I liked this depiction of like climate catastrophe. I didn't like it. I opposite of liked it, but I thought it was well done. And finally, Two Sherpas by Sebastián, Martínez, Daniell, and this is translated by Jennifer Croft, and it is published by Charco Press. And this also is just so rich with so many different things to discuss and think about. And that's, I think, what brings it to my short list. They're the different threads that the 5 different threads that I mentioned when I was doing my drawing. Just each of them have so much depth and just details to discuss. And I think what ultimately brings this to my short list is the way the author took what is essentially a 10-minute scene with a few, like 13 lines of dialogue between 2 people and explodes it into an entire novel. And from a craft perspective, I think that is just brilliant. I listened to an interview with the author and he said something along those lines, which was what impressed me before I even heard the author mention that in an interview. But he said that, one of his intentions was to show the power of literature and how you could take a 10-minute scene and blow it up into a whole book. So it makes it to my short list. However, we do have an honorable mention, and that would have to be The Birthday Party by Laurent Mauvignier. And this is just a brilliant book. I thought this was such an unusual take on a thriller, really. It's very, very literary thriller, but this is a thriller. And I was so hooked at the beginning of this novel by the writing style. I've heard other readers say that it took them a long time to get into the book, but once they got to a certain point, they were hooked, and it was like really propulsive towards the just explosive ending. I was the exact opposite. I loved it from the first page-long sentence. I think the first sentence is like almost a page long, maybe half a page. I loved that style. I loved how slow it was and how much time it was taking to get to the juicy stuff. I loved all the details. I loved the world. I loved the characters. I loved the setting. It was exactly my kind of thing. By the end, I was very frustrated, just wanting to get to the point because it maintains that style throughout. It goes slowly even when the events at the end are picking up and going quickly, and spending so much time in each character's head. By the time I got to the end, I was really ready to get through it. Doesn't quite make it up to my short list, but I did really, really love it. But that's my short list. I'm gonna stick with it and say this is my personal short list for the Republic of Consciousness Prize, US and Canada. I'll see you next week. I hope to film a live reaction to the shortlist announcement, but I'm also traveling for work leading up to that, so I'm not 100% sure if that will happen or not. If you have signed up for my newsletter in the past, the indie arrivals for February will probably be a little bit later in March, just because I've been working on this Longlist project. So you'll still see that email come out with all the amazing books I found that were published in the month of February from independent publishers and university presses. If you haven't yet signed up for my newsletter, I will leave a link for that below. I hope you have a fantastic day. My name is Sarah. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.